Hi there, in this video I want to show you how to do the scallop trim around the edge of your Rumours vest. For this video I've made View B, which is the open front with the lace ups. So I've got to my last row, I've got a stitch marker in there holding my last row, and I've not fastened off, and as the pattern instructs I've ended on a 2 treble row. So don't end on a 1 treble row, end on a 2 treble row. Okay, if you've ended up there, then you will need to fasten off and reattach here to start your front edges. Okay, so that's a 2 treble row, but I haven't fastened off because I've ended there as opposed to on the other side, and I've now worked my slip stitches all the way around this front edge. So the pattern asks you to do this because if you don't, the front edges can end up stretching and they can sort of go all the way down here, and it can end up being quite low cut, and also your straps can stretch as well, and then the whole top just becomes lower and can show quite a lot of cleavage. I've learnt that through trial and error. So I'm slip stitching around this front edge. It's a bit like in sewing where you have stay stitching to stop your fabric stretching. Okay, so I've joined my yarn into this point here, which is the point where I stopped working diagonally and started working straight. So it's where I worked my first 2 treble into the end of my 3 treble group. So attach your yarn in there, and then you're going to slip stitch into the post, the side of the sort of post of the stitch, the side of the stitch, and then slip stitch into this sort of space here, which is the space between the 2 3 treble groups. Then slip stitch into the post of this stitch, slip stitch into this space here. It's not really a space, it's actually the top of the stitch, but you've already worked into it, so it becomes like quite a big sort of opening. Then slip stitch into there and slip stitch into this. So slip stitch to there, slip stitch to there, slip stitch to there, slip stitch into there. So continue to do that all the way around, and then it becomes easier when you get to your first foundation double crochet or foundation single crochet if you're in the US. When you get to your first one of those stitches, you just slip stitch 1 stitch into each foundation double crochet stitch all the way around till you get to the other side, and then do exactly the same thing on the other side. So slip stitch into the post of the stitch and then slip stitch into the top of that last 3 treble stitch. Okay, so do that all the way around and then fasten off there, and then you're back working from here to work up your double crochet stitches for your front edge. Okay, so because I'm going to be working up the front edge of my vest, I've turned it horizontally. Okay, so you need to chain 1, and then you're going to work 1 double crochet around. So put your hook right between those 2 double crochets at the end and go right around the whole post of the stitch. So 1 double crochet on the end of the first row and 2 double crochets on the end of the second row. So go right into that space, right around the stitch, once and then twice. 1 double crochet around the next row. So that's single crochets if you're in the US. 2 double crochets around the end of the next row, 1 in the end of the next row, and then just continue to alternate between 2 and 1 double crochet until you get to the end. Like so, for me that's working out really nicely. It's not too tight, it's not looking like I've got too many stitches in there. If you do need to adjust this, don't worry, it won't affect the pattern. Okay, so do that all the way to the end. So I've reached the end of my straight section, and my front edge looks like that, and I've got that last section to work into where I started working straight, that first 2 treble that I worked on my straight section, and it says 3 treble in the last row, so I'm going to work 3 double crochets in the last row. So I'm going to work 3 double crochets in there, and that's to try and blend from the double crochets into the scallops. So for the scallops that we're going to work around our diagonal front edge, you're going to do 4 half treble into the stitch at the top of the next 3 treble group, and then slip stitch into the stitch at the top of the next 3 treble group. So we are going to work a scallop all across there. The middle of the scallop is going to go into there, and we're going to slip stitch to there. Middle of the scallop goes there, slip stitch to there. You can see there's kind of a sort of a hole where that stitch has been stretched because you've worked the 3 trebles into the top of that last stitch, and that's where we're going to work into. So we're going to work 4 half trebles, which is 4 half double crochets if you're following US terms, into that space there. So I've made my 4 half trebles, and now I'm going to slip stitch into the space, or the stitch between those 2 groups. So now I'm going to work my next scallop into there. And then slip stitch into there between those 2 3 treble groups. And you're going to work the next group into there. My yarn's getting a bit splitty now because I've used this bit and frogged it a few times. And then slip stitch into there. So you're going right over those slip stitches, and you can see the scallop starting to appear. The slip stitches are quite obvious too because you're going right over the original slip stitches that you made. So the next group goes into here. And then you're going to slip stitch into there. And then the next group will go into there, and I'll end up slip stitching into my first foundation double crochet stitch. You might find that depending on how many groups you have down your front, some sizes will find that you actually end your last scallop there and you're starting another scallop there, but that's okay either way. We'll slip stitch into there, and now I've just got a bit further to travel because I've ended there. So we're going to work our next scallop into that space there. So the stitch hold foundation double crochet stitch holding the first 3 treble group. So I've slip stitched into the stitch holding the 4 trebles that you made at the very start of your setup row. So that's my first foundation double crochet stitch, and then the next one is going into there. Just get that out of the way. Oops. And then you're going to slip stitch into the next stitch, which is there. And then the next scallop goes into the stitch holding the next 3 treble groups, so you're going right over those slip stitches. They're just there to prevent everything from stretching. And then slip stitch into the next group, which is there. And then you're just going to continue that, working your scallops into the 3 treble group stitch all the way around. Even when you get to the corner, you'll be working a scallop in there, and then just continue that all the way back round to the opposite front edge. So if you remember on the other side, I had to slip stitch into the first foundation double crochet, which is here. So instead of slip stitching into this stitch here, I'm actually going to miss 2 and slip stitch into there. Okay, and then I'm going to start my next scallop, which goes into that space there. So we're now working down the left front edge in exactly the same way, trying to keep it symmetrical. We're going to slip stitch into there, and you can just make sure that you're going to end on the end of a scallop. So I'm going to scallop there, slip stitch there, scallop there, slip stitch there, scallop there, slip stitch there, scallop there, and slip stitch there, which is, you can see it's the end because it's where the slip stitches end. So I know that's going to work out, and it's going to be symmetrical with the other side. So I'm just going to continue to work my scallops down this edge. So I'm going to slip stitch into there, slip stitch into there, scallop into there, and slip stitch into the end. So I've reached the start of my left front edge, the straight section, which begins with a 2 treble group. So if you remember on the other side, we ended in 3 double crochets across the end of that row. So we're going to start with 3 double crochets across the end of that row. So it's UK double crochet, US single crochet. So I've just done 3 double crochets in that row, and then we're going to go. We're going to work exactly as we did on the other side, so completely symmetrical. I think I was going 1, 2, 1, 2, and then I did my 3. So I ended on a 2 and then went into the 3 double crochets. So I need to do 2 in there. I remember that I was doing 2 double crochets in the rows that ended in a 1 treble, and 1 double crochet in the rows that end in 2 treble. So I'm going to do 2 double crochets, then 1 in the next row, 2 across the next row, 1 in the next row, all the way to the end, and then I'll show you how to work your scallop trim across the bottom. So we've reached the end. I've done 1 double crochet into the last row, and then we're going to work our scallops around our hem. So we're not going to slip stitch around our hem because we don't want it to be tight, we want it to be stretchy. So you're going to work 2 half trebles into the space between these 2 double crochets on the end of your row. So 2 half trebles, 2 half double crochets if you're working in US terms, and then you're going to slip stitch to the top of the second treble. So you're going to slip stitch to there, and that's just kind of like a little mini scallop on the corner. Then you're going to work 4 half trebles into the middle stitch of the next 3 treble groups, so into there, and then you're going to slip stitch to the top of the last stitch in the 3 treble group, and then you're going to 4 treble into the middle stitch of the next 3 treble group, and then you're going to slip stitch into the last stitch. So you can see that the scallops are lined up with the 3 treble groups. So the next scallop, your next 4 half trebles will work into there, slip stitch into there, scallop into there, slip stitch into there, and then continue that all the way around your hem. So I've worked my scallops all the way along my hem, working each scallop into the middle treble and slip stitching into the last treble of each group, and then I've just slip stitched into the last stitch of my last 3 treble group, and I'm going to work 2 half trebles into the space between the last 2 treble crochets, so 1 and 2, and then I'm just going to slip stitch to the first double crochet to fasten off. So that's the end of the front edge, or the inner edge.